Somewhere in a driveway right now, a Chevrolet is quietly turning into money. Not the shiny new truck 3 doors down. The one sitting under a dusty cover in the garage nobody talks about. The one somebody's grandfather bought decades ago and never got around to selling. Most people look at these cars and see rust, faded paint, and outdated technology. Collectors look at the same cars and see something else entirely, a closing window. Because right now, 7 different Chevrolet models are moving through a phase almost nobody is watching. Prices are creeping, then jumping, then, without warning, shattering records at auction houses that used to ignore them completely. A work truck that once sold for scrap money now trades for the price of a house down payment. A Corvette nicknamed the King of the Hill spent 30 years getting overlooked, and the market just woke up. A Nova, an ordinary-looking Nova, just sold for more than $850,000. This isn't nostalgia talking. This is a pattern. And the people who understand it are buying quietly, while everyone else is still calling these just old Chevys. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which 7, why they're accelerating, and which one almost nobody has caught onto yet. For 20 years, nobody wanted these trucks. Not collectors, not investors, not even the people who own them. If you had a Chevy square body sitting in your driveway in the 1990s, it wasn't a classic. It was just old. You drove it until something broke, and when something broke, you either fixed it in an afternoon or you hauled it to the junkyard and bought whatever was cheap. Millions of these trucks disappeared that way. Nobody kept records. Nobody photographed the ones getting crushed. They were tools, not treasures. That mistake is starting to look expensive. Chevrolet built the square body from 1973 to 1987, and it ran for 15 model years without a major redesign, an almost unheard-of stretch in the auto industry. GM even put the thing through wind tunnel testing, rounding off the windshield pillars and side glass on a truck people still call boxy to this day. That long, stable production run did something nobody predicted. It created a massive, interchangeable parts ecosystem, which means restorers today can source what they need without hunting for unicorn components. That alone turned a disposable work truck into one of the easiest classics on the market to bring back to life. And the money has followed. Auction data now tracks more than 1,300 square body sales totaling over $34.5 million in just 5 years. The average sale price has climbed past $26,000, but that number is dragging behind reality. Clean, well-restored examples now regularly bring $40,000 to $60,000, and the top recorded sale, a 1983 C10 Custom, sold for $228,250 at Mecum. A truck that once got left in a field. Here's the part that should bother anyone who owned one and let it go. A good running square body from the 70s or 80s now sells for more money than a brand new base model truck cost when it left the factory. Somewhere out there is a guy who sold his for a few $100 just to clear space in the garage. He is not thinking about that truck fondly right now. The truck wasn't the only Chevrolet that spent decades getting ignored for the same reason. One nameplate did it even longer, wore a nickname that promised greatness, and still got treated like an afterthought for almost 30 straight years. Imagine building the fastest, most advanced car your company has ever made. Imagine giving it a nickname that promises dominance. Now imagine the market shrugging at it for almost 3 decades. That's exactly what happened to the Corvette ZR-1. When Chevrolet launched it in 1990, this wasn't a trim package or a stripe kit. It was a ground-up re-engineering. The centerpiece was the LT5 engine, a 5.7-liter V8 developed in partnership with Lotus and built by Mercury Marine, sharing almost nothing with the standard Corvette's motor underneath it. GM wasn't just trying to beat Ford or Dodge with this car. They were aiming at Ferrari and Porsche, and for a brief moment, they actually got there. Journalists at the time called it the King of the Hill. Michael Jordan owned one. Kids stopped on sidewalks to watch it pass. And then, almost nobody cared. For years, the median value of a C4 ZR-1 sat frozen at roughly where it had been back in 2009. While two-seat sports cars from the same era were climbing, and the Dodge Viper market was going borderline insane, the ZR-1 just sat there, technically brilliant and financially forgotten. It's one of the strangest blind spots in the entire collector car world. A car that genuinely competed with European exotics and period, priced like an afterthought. That's finally starting to change. One documented sale hit $74,025, nearly 50% above the top condition guide value for the model, and one of the highest prices ever recorded for a C4 generation Corvette at auction. That's not a fluke. That's a market waking up to something it slept on for 30 years. Here's the uncomfortable truth for anyone who owned one and sold it in the 2000s or 2010s. You probably let go of the most technically advanced Corvette of its generation for pennies on tomorrow's dollar. As earlier Corvette generations get priced out of reach for most buyers, collectors are turning to the C4 as the entry point with real upside left, and the ZR-1 sits right at the top of that generation's food chain. Chevrolet clearly remembered what that name meant, because decades later, they brought the nickname back, dropped it onto a completely different kind of Corvette, and built something even more extreme to wear it. Here's a mistake a lot of new collectors are making right now, in real time, assuming the newest Corvette is automatically the smartest buy. It isn't. Not always. The C7 Corvette, built through 2019, holds a title that can never be repeated. It's the last Corvette with a front-mounted engine and the classic long hood silhouette that defined the nameplate for over 60 years. It's also the last Corvette you could order with a manual transmission. When the C8 arrived and moved the engine behind the driver, it wasn't just a redesign. It was the end of a lineage. And last of cars have a track record in this hobby. They tend to hold value, sometimes stubbornly, long after everything around them depreciates. Data already shows C8 Corvettes losing value faster than the C7s they replaced, because the C7 isn't just a used car anymore. It's the final chapter of something. Would you pay extra today for a car specifically because it's the last of its kind? Because that's exactly what serious buyers are doing right now with C7Z06 and ZR-1 models. Then there's the car currently wearing the crown. Chevrolet resurrected the King of the Hill name for the new C8 generation ZR-1, and this time it isn't nostalgia marketing. The car backed it up. In 2026, it beat a lap record at Virginia International Raceway that had stood since 2019, previously held by a McLaren Senna, a car that costs several times more. Car and Driver's own testing confirmed it. This is a Corvette outrunning cars that used to embarrass everything with a bow tie on the hood. Here's why that matters to you as a collector, not just a driver. History shows the first and last examples of any special performance nameplate tend to become the most desirable down the line. Buyers who understand that pattern aren't waiting for these cars to become classics. They're buying them new, today, while they're still just the current model to everyone else. That's the entire game. Getting in before the rest of the market recognizes what it's looking at. But long before Chevrolet ever revived that nickname, there was an earlier Corvette that didn't need a marketing name to become an obsession. It needed something rarer, a design choice so controversial, the company killed it after a single year. Zora Arkus-Duntov, the engineer many call the father of the Corvette, reportedly hated one specific detail on the car that made his reputation. He thought it was dangerous. He fought to have it removed. And for exactly one model year, Chevrolet ignored him. That detail was the split rear window on the 1963 Corvette Stingray Coupe, a thin steel bar running straight down the center of the back glass, cutting rear visibility almost in half. Duntov argued it made the car harder to see out of and less safe to drive. Chevrolet's design team fought to keep it anyway, because it looked incredible. The compromise lasted a single year. For 1964, the bar was gone, the rear glass became one piece, and the split window disappeared from production forever. That one-year fight is the entire reason this car became an obsession. Instant, permanent scarcity, created not by a factory shortage, but by an internal argument nobody outside GM even knew was happening. And collectors have chased it ever since. One buyer on Bring a Trailer has spent over $5.26 million acquiring 26 different split-window coupes since 2023, a spending pattern so aggressive that one recent purchase, at $352,000, landed 60% above the top condition guide value for that specific engine configuration. That's not investing. That's obsession with a price tag attached. And scarcity within the scarcity exists too. Only 63 of these coupes, out of over 21,000 Corvettes built that year, were ordered with the extended 36-gallon fuel tank option, a number so small it represents roughly 0.3% of total production. Find one of those, And you're not just holding a split window. You're holding one of the rarest configurations of the rarest configuration. Here's the part that stings if you're the wrong person reading this. Somewhere, decades ago, an original owner traded one of these in for whatever the dealer offered, or sold it outright, because a one-year styling quirk didn't seem worth keeping around. Today, clean examples list anywhere from the low six figures past $497,000, and that original owner never saw a dime of it. A styling disagreement created one of the most obsessed over Corvettes in history. But that same decade, a completely different Chevrolet used a paperwork loophole to build something the company officially said should never exist. General Motors had a rule in the late 1960s, and it wasn't written to be broken. No engine larger than 400 cubic inches in a midsize or smaller car. Not the Chevelle, not the Nova, and definitely not the Camaro. Corporate policy, full stop. Except paperwork doesn't always care about policy. Chevrolet used a system called the Central Office Production Order, or COPO, originally designed for boring fleet orders, taxis, police cars, delivery vehicles. In 1969, someone figured out that COPO could be used to quietly order a Camaro with the 427 cubic inch L72 big block, completely bypassing the displacement ban nobody at GM wanted to formally lift. Around 1,000 cars were built this way under COPO 9561. A second, far rarer order, COPO 9560, went even further, fitting an all-aluminum ZL-1 427 originally designed for racing. Only 69 of those exist. This wasn't a factory flex. It was a workaround Chevrolet never fully admitted to, and collectors have chased that secrecy ever since. The record for a standard COPO 427 now sits at $440,000. Meanwhile, the market punishes hesitation without mercy. One numbers matching COPO with a documented racing history and a genuinely rare color combination failed to sell not once, but twice, at high bids around $175,000 and then $200,000 before finally moving. The owner wanted more. The market said not yet. That's the kind of gap that keeps collectors up at night, wondering if they priced their own car wrong. Would you have held out for a higher number or taken the guaranteed sale? That's the exact bet every COPO owner is making right now. Here's the regret that should really sting. A decade ago, clean COPO 427s were trading hands for well under $200,000. Buyers who hesitated, who thought the price was already too high, watched the market climb past them without asking permission. That's the pattern with hidden production Chevrolets. The rarity doesn't announce itself. It just quietly becomes undeniable, usually right after you decide to wait one more year. COPO wasn't the wildest use of that loophole either. One dealer took the same paperwork trick and pushed it somewhere even Chevrolet's own engineers seemed uneasy about, building a car that would eventually outrun almost everything else on this list. By 1970, the muscle car horsepower war had turned into something close to an arms race, and Chevrolet decided to drop the biggest bomb it had. That bomb was the LS6, a 454 cubic inch big block rated at 450 horsepower, though most people close to the program believe the real number was higher. GM had finally lifted its internal displacement ban that same year, and Chevrolet used the opening to build the single most powerful engine it would ever put in a Chevelle. Solid lifters, forged internals, an 11.25-to-1 compression ratio built for premium fuel and zero compromise. Period testing put it through the quarter mile in the low 13-second range, numbers that embarrassed cars costing far more. Then insurance companies and emissions regulations arrived almost immediately afterward and shut the entire era down. The LS6 wasn't just powerful. It was the last car of its kind before the door slammed shut. That finality is exactly why the auction results have gone the way they have. In May 2024, a white LS6 convertible set a new Chevelle record at $660,000, including fees. Collectors assumed that number would stand for years. It lasted about 18 months. At Mecum's Kissimmee 2026 sale, a dark red LS6 convertible, numbers matching and equipped with the desirable 4-speed manual, sold for $770,000. Becoming the single most expensive Chevelle ever sold at public auction. Any year, any trim. 2 records, broken twice, inside 2 years. Would you have paid $770,000 for a Chevelle? Sit with that number for a second. because plenty of bidders in that room did exactly that without blinking. But this market isn't a straight line upward, and that's the part people forget. A different LS6 example spiked to a $220,000 sale. Then, roughly 18 months later, dropped to a $130,000 high bid at a separate auction, a massive swing that caught more than one owner off guard. Buy at the wrong moment in this market, and the correction can be brutal. Buy the right car with the right documentation, and you're sitting on a car that just outpaced inflation by a mile. Even at $770,000, this wasn't the most expensive Chevrolet sold that same weekend. That distinction belonged to a car built to look completely ordinary, wearing a badge nobody ever expected to be worth a fortune. If you parked a 1969 Nova next to a Camaro or a Chevelle, nobody would look twice. That was the entire point. The Nova was Chevrolet's entry-level compact, a plain, forgettable shape that started at around $2,200 brand new. Don Yenko, the dealer already famous for turning Camaros and Chevelles into monsters, wanted to do the same thing to the Nova. Chevrolet initially refused, worried about insurance liability and safety concerns tied to putting that much power into such a light, small car. Yenko pushed anyway, converting a small handful, somewhere around 37 units, from a 375 horsepower 396 into a 427 cubic inch big block, making 450 horsepower and 460 lb-ft of torque, in a car weighing roughly 3,100 pounds. The result ran 0 to 60 in about 4.3 seconds and the quarter mile in 11.6, on period tires, no less. That's quicker than plenty of Camaro ZL1s, quicker than most Chevelle SS 390 SIXS, quicker than some Corvettes wearing the legendary L88 badge. And almost nobody knew it existed. That was intentional. Factory paint, subtle Yenko stripes, no wild graphics screaming for attention. The ultimate sleeper, built to embarrass cars that looked far more serious. Today, fewer than 10 are confirmed to still exist. Some estimates put it closer to 7. When one surfaces, the results are no longer surprising. They're historic. At Mecum's Kissimmee 2026 sale, a numbers-matching example opened bidding at $300,000, a number that already exceeded any previous unmodified Nova sale outright. It didn't stop there. Bidding pushed past $450,000, then $500,000, then kept climbing until it landed at $852,500, a new world record, and a jump of over $400,000 from the previous record of $418,000 set just over a decade earlier. Think back to where this video started. A truck considered so disposable that people scrapped them without a second thought. Now look at this. The least respected badge on this entire list, the cheapest car Chevrolet sold in 1969, just became the single most expensive car in the whole lineup you've watched today. Somewhere, someone owned one of these and had no idea what was sitting in their garage. Somewhere, someone else did know and refused every offer that came their way. That second person is the one still smiling. What would you do if you found out the boring car in your garage was secretly the rarest thing you own? 7 Chevrolets. 7 completely different stories. One identical pattern underneath all of them. Every car on this list was underestimated before it was celebrated. A work truck too common to matter. A Corvette too overshadowed by its own reputation. A modern car dismissed as just the current model. A styling quirk killed after a single year. A loophole nobody outside GM even knew existed. An engine built right before the industry banned everything like it. And a compact car so plain, its own dealer had to hide what was under the hood. In every single case, somebody sold too early. Somebody looked at a future record breaker and saw nothing worth keeping. That mistake is the real lesson here, more than any single price tag. The market doesn't announce which car is about to matter. It just quietly rewards the people who were paying attention before everyone else was. So here's the real question. Out of these 7, which one do you think still has the most room left to climb? And which one do you think has already peaked? Somewhere out there is an 8th Chevrolet nobody's talking about yet. That one's coming next.